Welcome to the Making of Madrid, a podcast about everything to do with life in Madrid, covering history, culture, food, and more. The show is presented, as always, by me, Felicity Hughes, Madrid resident, freelance journalist, and tour guide. This podcast began life as a history blog, but has since expanded into much more and hopes to entertain and inform visitors, newcomers, and English-speaking residents in Madrid. If you've been enjoying the show, please do click the like button and leave a review and say why. Reviews are really important to me, so I'd super appreciate it. Thanks a lot. And if you want more news from me, you can subscribe to my newsletter by visiting my website. That's themakingofmadrid.com. I'll be launching my new book, Quiet Madrid, soon. That's a guide to the city's third places and hidden spaces. So you can find more about it first there. So please do get on my website and join my newsletter if you so feel inclined. I'm recording this episode on a snowy day in Madrid. Sadly, that snow has not settled. We almost never have snow here. We had snow the last time during the pandemic, and it was absolutely magical. You can probably see some photos of that on Instagram because lots of people went out and took pictures of the city clothed in white. But that's so rare for us. But it was a really magical day where all the rules seemed suspended. You might know that we had a very strict lockdown in Spain. So people came out and had this huge snow fight on Gran Via. And it was totally liberating, and I think something that we all needed. Anyway, getting back to today, 2025, it's cold, it's dark, which is unusual in Madrid, but it does happen in winter. And so I'm staying in and recording an episode for you. It's not entirely dark in my life because my Lonely Planet books that I spent all last year working on have just been released. So that's the Big Guide to Madrid, the Pocket Guide to Madrid, and the Madrid chapter of the Spain Guide. I worked really, really hard on this, going around the city, revisiting lots of places, visiting some places for the first time. And Lonely Planet are great because they let you give your absolutely honest opinion. I think that's what readers are paying for. So I think I'm in a really good position to do an episode right now about what are the most overrated and underrated attractions in Madrid. Now, I may get some controversy off the back of this because, of course, everyone has their opinion. And my opinion, of course, is completely personal. But I'm going to back it up with lots of facts and research because this is my jam. I know all about this kind of stuff. So without further ado, let's get on to, we'll begin with the negative and then we'll move on to the positive. And even when I'm talking about the negative, I'm going to give you lots of suggestions of where to go otherwise. So, let's get cracking with overrated attractions. I've chosen, 4 attractions, and you might be quite surprised by them. So my first one to kick off is Sol. Now, you can't avoid Sol, obviously, because Sol is the central transport hub in Madrid. Well, one of the central transport hubs. You've got the Cercanías line going through there and most of the metro lines going through there. It's the best place to get out to go and see the Plaza Mayor. But I'm going to suggest that you don't linger in Sol because Sol could be fantastic. And yet there are a few reasons why it's not as fantastic as it should be. So one of the things maybe you should do very quickly is go and have your photo taken with the bear and the strawberry tree. Okay, so you'll see a line of people in front of this statue of the bear and the strawberry tree. It's actually a fairly recent statue. It was installed in 1967. and it's the work of sculptor Antonio Navarro Santa Fe. It's based on the central element of our coat of arms, and I think it's a fun thing to have your photo taken in front of. Lots of people like to touch the bear's hindquarters for luck, and the bronze statue has sort of gone golden in that point. But it's not a particularly historical thing, and neither are many of the sites in Seoul. The Tio Pepe sign, for instance, has been moved over to another building. It was originally installed in the 1920s. It was going to be taken down entirely because there was a ban on these kind of neon signs going up. But we decided there was a big sort of public outcry, so it got moved elsewhere. So that's also iconic, but just snap a quick photo and be done with it. The oldest building in Seoul is a building around which there's swirling a lot of controversy. And this has sort of soured me slightly against this building, even though it's a fantastic place to go for New Year's, because this oldest building, I should say, is an 18th century building called the Casa de Correos, which was installed at the behest of Charles III, whose statue you can see in Seoul. It's a handsome kind of building, but it has a very dark history attached to it, because during Franco's dictatorship, a lot of people were tortured in the basement. They were snapped up by the secret police, who were called Los Grises, the Greys. They were sort of colloquially known as this. And if you want to know about that, you can read an article that I just published in the New European in the UK. You can go online and search for that. And it explains the controversy in which, in a nutshell, there are a whole bunch of plaques on the front of Seoul commemorating the victims of COVID, commemorating the victims of the Atocha terrorist attacks, but there is no plaque acknowledging that torture went on in the basement. The building is now the offices of the president of the Comunidad de Madrid, Isabel Ayuso. And Isabel Ayuso is a member of the right-wing PP party, and she is very much opposed to putting in a plaque. She thinks that the building should be a symbol of harmony. Personally, I think now is the time for Spain to deal with the trauma of its dictatorship, and for young people to know about what happened so that such atrocities cannot be repeated. Anyway, I'm not going to go into this in great detail because you can read my article, and it's a very complex and thorny subject. The other sort of old institution in Seoul is the Casa de Diego. It's a beautiful old store that sells fans, and you can read all about it in a blog post I did on the oldest stores in Madrid. But it's actually the most unpleasant of the oldest stores in Madrid because the staff are famously really, really rude. When I went in there to write about the oldest stores in Madrid, they treated me with utter disdain. And I think there are other old stores in Madrid in which I've been treated with charm, and people are very welcoming. And perhaps it's because they're in Seoul and it's an incredibly busy place and a place where people don't linger. And this is another thing. It's like no one wants to linger in Seoul because there are no sort of places where you can sit outside on a terraza. And it's been equipped with what is called hostile architecture. So the benches are made of granite, so no one can lie down. In fact, they have little knobbly bits on, so it would be uncomfortable for a homeless person to lie down in it. So it was completely renovated, and the plans were laid out during the time of Manuela Carmena. She was our mayor. And there were lots of plans to install trees in Seoul. And then the new mayor came in, And this new mayor, Almeida, scrapped all the plans for the trees. And so Sol is just a concrete expanse. The renovation did nothing to make the square more hospitable for humans. In fact, it did quite the opposite. It made it more inhospitable. This is a real bugbear for me. Again, I'm going to point you to an article that I wrote for The Guardian about this very issue. And I'm a bit upset about it at the moment because I would have said that Plaza Santa Ana is a great alternative if you're looking for a charming Spanish square nearby. It used to be lined with trees, but because an underground car park is being renovated by a company called Grupo Ortiz at the behest of, you guessed it, our mayor, they're removing the trees right now. There was a huge fight to preserve these trees. At the head of this fight, sort of leading it up, was an organization called No a la Tala. And one of their spokespeople was the very famous actress, Marisa Paredes. You might know Marisa Paredes for Almodovar classics like High Heels. She had this lovely beak-like nose, and I'm talking about her in the past tense because Marisa Paredes stood up on a bench last summer in 39-degree heat and did this very impassioned speech to try and save the trees in Plaza Santa Ana. And this campaign really wasn't successful. The local government said that they would have talks with neighbours, but the upshot was a lot of half promises, which they appear to be going back on now because there's footage right now, trees being removed in the square. We have very, very hot summers in Madrid. So trees are really necessary for a happy city. Greenpeace did this fantastic video last summer, sort of very satirical about, the temperature of these squares, these concrete expanses in summer, and it's absolutely unbearable because it exacerbates the heat island effect, just having all those concrete expanses. So Marisa Paredes must be turning in her grave right now, and one even wonders whether or not her death a few months back might have been caused by the heat stress she underwent giving this big speech in Santa Ana. And about a month ago, I went to the protest before they started the construction work and saw her daughter, that's Maria Isasi, give a very impassioned speech, and we all ended up in tears at the end of it. It was really sad. Anyway, I won't bang on about all of that because you can read my article in The Guardian. But what I will say is that never fear. Plaza Mayor is right nearby Sol, so I suggest you go into Sol, quickly take a few pictures, go straight up to Plaza Mayor and get a seat there because there's lovely terrazas out in Plaza Mayor. It's all pedestrianised. There are shady colonnades and it's a lovely place to sit and linger. However, again, no trees. There were trees back in the 19th century, but they got removed. If we want to have trees in a square, my top tip is Plaza Olavide in North Madrid. And trees were put into this square. And it's absolutely gorgeous. It's a delight on a Sunday morning to go out there and have breakfast. And the center of the square is a big playground. It's just gorgeous. It's what we should be having from our city squares. And yet our current administration are not delivering that. But if you're a visitor to Madrid, you're here to have fun, so don't worry too much about that. Go up to Plaza Olavide or go straight to Plaza Mayor and enjoy a better experience. My next overrated attraction is Mercado de San Miguel. Now, back in the day, in the late 19th century, there were several beautiful iron and glass markets in Madrid. In fact, that in Plaza Olavide, there used to be a circular glass market there. In Plaza de la Sabada, there used to be one. But the Mercado de San Miguel is the very last one surviving. And I believe it was constructed in the 1920s. It wasn't the most beautiful, but it's the most beautiful market now because it's all we have left. They were all modelled on Les Halles in Paris, which, as you probably know, Les Halles no longer exists in Paris. So if you want to see a structure like this, the Mercado de San Miguel is one of the very last ones remaining. However, after you've taken a peek at it, it's a little bit like Seoul. Just look at it in passing and move on. Because if you go inside to try to have a meal, the whole place is absolutely mobbed. It's a victim of its own success. It's mainly tourists you'll find in there, and prices are totally overinflated. It's just really not very pleasant to linger there. Though when I do a tour of the city, because it's there and you have a lot of very typical Spanish food there, so you'll have like very high quality jamon, for instance, or salted cod, all these kind of typical Spanish dishes. I will take people through very briefly just so they can have a peek. And then I will tell them, go to any other municipal market, because the municipal markets in Madrid are often not in particularly attractive looking buildings. But once you go inside, they are incredible. In the 2000s, they were losing out quite a lot to the supermarkets, and stores were closing one after the other. It's a little bit like my local market in my area, where a lot of the stores are shuttered, although I still go there for my greengrocers, where I know all the people and I often end up chatting to the old ladies who are visiting the fruterias. This is actually where you will get the best quality fruit and vegetables. Don't go to the supermarket for fruit and vegetables. Most old people in Spain will tell you that the fruit and vegetables from the markets are 10 times better. And it's not particularly cheap, I have to say, but the quality is just excellent. I love the people who work in my fruit market. In fact, it's sort of one of the highlights of my day. If I have to go and shop for fruit and veg, I get chatting to them, and they know me, they know my husband, they ask about how our lives are going. It's just really nice. And they always give us some free herbs. But anyway, that's a total side note. The municipal markets in the centre have been very much reinvigorated by the fact that they, starting with Mercado de San Miguel, which was the leader of this trend, lots of stalls started renting out to places that were like little restaurants where you could go and drink a glass of wine and have some tapas. And they're much more convivial spaces where young people started coming to hang out and have fun. And all the other municipal markets are really fantastic in this respect. So I recommend you check out Mercado de Anton Martín, uphill in Lavapiés. That one has some really, really excellent restaurants in the basement. There's Doppelganger there, which is incredibly highly rated, and you have to book in advance to get a seat, but it's really fantastic. Down the hill, again in Lavapiés, is Mercado de San Fernando. That one is lots and lots of fun. It has a central area, So it's great for kids because kids often play out in that central area on a Saturday or a Sunday. Mercado de Mostenses, which is near Plaza de España, just around the back of Gran Via. That one is fantastic for international food. There's a really good Chinese place that does dim sum. There are fantastic South American restaurants there. The Mercado de Cebada, which is really great on a weekend for seafood, but is full of really interesting shops. So I could go on. I'm more of a South Madrid person, so these ones are my go-to ones, but there are ones in Northern Madrid that people rate as well. Moving on, my third, oh, my third item on the list is the Royal Palace. Oh my God, people are surprised by this one. The Royal Palace of Madrid is something you can't miss. You want to see the exterior. It's a really interesting building in that it's enormous. It was constructed under the Bourbons. You can read all about the history of the fire that happened during the reign of the Bourbons, in which the king just really, really wanted to construct a brand new palace that looked a lot like Versailles, which was where he grew up. It's a really ostentatious, enormous palace. It's got 3,000 rooms, only a fraction of which you'll see on a visit. There's another problem about going and visiting the palace in that sometimes it's used for state occasions, so it's closed then. So if you do really want to visit the palace, check in advance. But I don't think it's worth visiting the palace. And here are my reasons. So the first one is entirely personal, and it's down to my own tastes. I find displays of ostentatious wealth quite distasteful. I also find the Bourbon taste a little bit tacky. It's lots of gold and marble. It's a bit too much. Aside from that, you might really enjoy seeing all that because it's chock full of tapestries, etc. I think the tour is really terrible. You're chivied through rather quickly. There's not a lot of information. And there is a lot of royal loot, but if you want to really find out about the items on display in depth, it's much better to go to the Galería de Colecciones Reales. You may know that Spain endured a terrible civil war. And one of the first things that happened during the Republican government when Alfonso XIII ran away from Spain, this is in the sort of run up to the Civil War, all the royal properties were requisitioned and they became property of the state. And a lot of royal loot is still the property of the state. And all that you can see in the Galería de Colecciones Reales. You can see a Velázquez, you can see some Goyas, you can see some outstanding tapestries. And the sheer depth of information in that very modern building will give you much more of an insight and a perspective into Spain's royal families and the history of Madrid than you'll ever get in the Palacio Real. What you can do as well is buy a combined ticket for both. So if you really do want to see the Royal Palace, I just say please don't miss out the Galería de Colecciones Reales. It's not quite as busy. And you're getting far more bang for your buck out there. You also get the building is fantastic because it's built on a cliff and you get these amazing views out over the Campo de Moro towards the mountains. And it's quite spectacular. So the next item on my list, in fact, the last item on my list of overrated places may also be a little bit of a surprise. It's the Reina Sofia, the very famous modern art gallery right next to Atocha. I think the Reina Sofia could be fantastic, but there are several things that are holding it back. And I also think that there's another place that you can go to where you can get an equally good experience. and not have to endure these problematic issues that you have with the Reina Sofia. So one of my favorite artists is Grayson Perry. He's one of my favorite modern artists. And he's really eloquent about the art world and very humorous about it because he really nails down my problem with the Reina Sofia, which is full of what he calls art speak. The panels are written in the most opaque, pretentious way possible so that it gives you a really hard time trying to understand what the artist is getting at. And it's a little bit, to me, like the emperor's new clothes. If you can't explain your artwork simply and directly, why should I give my time over to this artwork? And perhaps this artwork isn't really making much of an impact on me anyway. It's actually true that Reina Sofia is full of incredible artwork, but the second problem is, how on earth are you going to find anything there? The floor plan will not tell you where works are located. And they scrap paper guides under COVID. So to get your bearings, you have to download a map of the building, but that doesn't come with any information about where particular paintings are located. You have to go back online and go to the website and search for particular artists and artworks. So this is assuming you know what artists and artworks you're looking for. Then you'll get a room number, and then you can go back to the floor plan and have a look and see where you need to go. It's really, really hard to navigate. I don't understand why, because it's an enormous collection and you need to be able to know where you're going easily. Most people, of course, go straight for Guernica, which is absolutely fantastic. And if you really must see Guernica, then go there. Do go there and have a look at it. But you may also sort of find the experience slightly stressful because on that floor, if you get your camera out, sorry, I'm about to sneeze. If you get your camera out and try to take a photo, you might end up being screamed at by a guard who will say, "No photo, no photo," which luckily is the same in Spanish as it is in English. Because my other problem with the Reina Sofia is that none of the guards speak English. They will get very huffy if you try and ask them where the toilet is or anything. I do this simply because I know that a lot of people coming to visit the gallery are not Spanish speakers, and I want to see, how they manage this, and they manage it very, very badly. I, of course, am fine speaking Spanish, but I think that in a place like the Reina Sofia, where probably more than half of the visitors are coming from overseas and don't speak Spanish, that staff should learn a few basic things like, how to guide somebody to the toilet, how to nicely and explain why you're not able to take photos, because this rule doesn't apply throughout the building. So I got very confused when I was shouted at there, because it's actually fine to take photos on other floors, but that's not explained anywhere. Again, really, really poor signage. I don't know why they can't sort these issues out, because the Reina Sofia could be great. However, you've got a great alternative just up the road on the Paseo del Prado. You can go and visit the Thyssen Bonavizza, which I never know if I'm pronouncing properly. But this is a huge collection of Baron Thyssen, who was an incredibly wealthy guy. The origins of his wealth are slightly murky, but we'll draw a veil over that. He collected modern art and Siglo d'Oro art and Renaissance art and, his wealth was just like on a par with the kings of Spain. And that's why you can go and see really, really great art that spans the gamut, from late medieval up until the present day. And more importantly, their modern art collection rivals the Reina Sofia's in one particular respect, because the Reina Sofia really concentrates on Spanish art. So you will see art from great Spanish painters like Picasso, Miro, Dali, Braque. Sorry, I said Braque and I actually should have said Juan Gris. So they were both cubists. So actually, the Reina Sofia does have a little bit of Juan Gris. Sorry, Braque. But the Reina Sofia mainly focuses on Spanish art, whereas the Thyssen has a wider collection that not only has these Spanish greats, but also has more international artists. So I'm a huge fan of Francis Bacon, and they've got Bacon's portrait of his lover. They've got Rothko. They've got Van Gogh. They've got lots of impressionists. It's just a staggeringly amazing art collection. And the museum is laid out really well. You can understand how things work. Everything goes consecutively. There's a really good guide, really good information online that will tell you more information about paintings. So it's just a lot more accessible. So my message is to the Reina Sofia is get your act together. You could be a fantastic museum. There's so much going for this museum, and yet it's just falling short in many areas. Now, we've done the negative. It's time for the positive. So, underrated. And I'm happy to tell you there is so much on my underrated list. I'm going to kick off. I suppose when we stop talking about galleries, so let's continue talking about galleries and other galleries you can visit in Madrid. Madrid is fantastic for art. One great little gallery, well, not little, it's enormous. One great gallery that not a lot of people visit is Conde Duque. Conde Duque is an old barracks built in the 18th century. It's got this fantastic gate done by Pedro de Ribera. It's all this sort of florid leaf work carved in stone. Inside, you'll see this huge parade ground. The complex is absolutely enormous. And if you turn to your left and keep going, you'll hit a whole section of galleries where they have different exhibitions on the ground floor. If you climb up to the second floor, there's a contemporary art museum with a really interesting collection. If you go even further up, there's a reconstruction of the offices of writer Ramon Gomez de Cerna. And this office is a whole cabinet of curiosities, of things that he collected in Spanish flea markets in the 20s and 30s. You can find out more about that on the post I have called Madrid Off the Beaten Track. But yeah, Conde Duque is a fantastic gallery that is always totally quiet. You usually have the place practically to yourself. And speaking of which, just off Sol, which is so surprising that this place is quiet, is the Real Academia de Bellas Artes de San Fernando. And if you really struggle with crowds like me, you may want to go here rather than going to the Prado. Of course, there's no substitute for going to the Prado because the Prado is one of the world's great galleries. If you're struggling with crowds by the way into the Prado, look at my post, which is called The Quiet Corners of the Prado, and you can really find some nice little secret corners to escape to if it all gets a bit much. But of course, you have to go and see the Garden of Earthly Delights. Of course, you have to go and see Las Meninas. These are really, blockbuster works of art. But also go and check out the Real Academia de Bellas Artes de San Fernando, because if you want to see some Siglo de Oro famous Spanish painters like Pedro de Rivera, Zurbarán, these fantastic masters, they've got quite a few in that place. They've also got the statue of the Ángel Caído, the fallen angel, the famous statue of the devil, which also stands in Retiro. Of course, more than one casting was made. And they have some amazing etchings by Goya. The Real Academia was an art school attended by Goya, and they have lots of his artwork. The famous painting of the burial of the sardine. If you listen to the previous podcast, you can find out all about that. And yeah, it was a Royal Academy. Interestingly, Picasso went there when he was a precocious 16-year-old, and he thought it was a very fuddy-duddy institution. And he skipped class the whole time and went to the Prado. And shortly after, he moved on to Barcelona and then Paris, and never really came back to Madrid. But yeah, I do go to the Academia because it's so quiet. You can just stand and contemplate the artwork in peace, and it's lovely. Anyway, on to my next little secret gallery. That's La Neo Moreja, which is a modern art gallery that's converted from an old railway workshop just around the back of Atocha. And it's sort of this slightly disheveled, ruined space. You almost feel like you're going into a squatted building. And a lot of the artists visit the space before doing an installation and think very carefully about how their art is going to have a conversation with that sort of old industrial space. It's a really fascinating place to visit, even if you're not enjoying the art. Of course, modern art is very much, Marmite for a lot of people. You either love it or hate it. But it's worth going to see just for the space as well. Now, moving on, let's tackle museums. I've got a blog post. Sorry, I'm referencing lots of blog posts in this one. But this blog post is about museums of Madrid. And I love the Madrid museums, which again aren't super popular, which is crazy because they're free. And they will tell you the history of Madrid. So if you want to start at the beginning, go to the Museo de San Isidro in La Latina, and you'll find out about the fossil record in Madrid. You'll see the bones of a mammoth in the Manzanares that goes up all the way through to Muslim Madrid, and then up through to the sort of late Middle Ages. So we get into La Latina herself, her grave, who was La Latina. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm going to say this again. But check out my blog post on La Latina because she's fantastic from a feminist perspective. She was a prodigy in languages who wound up being the tutor to Queen Isabel's daughters now. That's the famous Queen Isabel of Isabel and Fernando, who unified Spain by conquering the kingdom of Granada. And also marrying themselves because they were, kings and queens of different regions. And their daughters were Catherine of Aragon, who very famously married Henry VIII. Catherine of Aragon would have been taught by La Latina, and we know that Catherine of Aragon believed in education for women because she had a book written about how women ought to be educated when she became Queen of England. The other daughter was Juana, who infamously became called Juana the Mad because when her mother died, so she became Queen of Castile, and her father wanted to take over, so he had her declared mad. And so she was called Juana the Mad. Whether or not she was mad is a question for historical debate that we won't go into here. But yeah, read my blog post if you want to know more about La Latina. She's an interesting character. Other great museums in Madrid are the Museum of Natural Sciences, and this one doesn't tend to be visited by a lot of tourists in Madrid because it's all the way out by Nuevos Ministerios, but it's a beautiful late 19th century building, great example of mudéjar architecture. Mudéjar, by the way, is a style of architecture that neo-mudéjar architecture, which revived mudéjar architecture, which is architecture built by Muslim artisans back when Spain began the transitioning into being a Christian-ruled kingdom. Anyway, I'm going off on lots of tangents today. I hope you're finding it entertaining. So the Museum of Natural Sciences, you'll find dinosaur bones and things of the like, and it's great fun. A great place to take kids. Absolutely banging place to take kids. Another good place to take kids is the Museum of Anthropology, which is right opposite Atocha and has a really interesting ghost story associated with it. And I'm not going to go into another tangent on that, but I'm going to tell you to again go to my blog. Go to my blog and read the tale of Dr. Velasco's mummified daughter. So if you take kids here, there's a whole room filled with skeletons. I guess you'll have to see what their sensibility is to that. You don't necessarily have to go into that room, but yeah, it's your typical sort of spine-chilling late 19th century museum that is slightly macabre and has these sort of old wooden cabinets and things. But it's a really fantastic place to visit. For more sort of quiet museums in Madrid, I'm definitely going to go into that a lot in my new book, Quiet Madrid, that's coming out soon. Another fantastic museum that's a little bit off the beaten track is the National Archaeological Museum. And this is near Recoletos Station, right on the other side. You come out on the Biblioteca Nacional, and if you skirt around that building, in the other side of the building, it's an immense building, by the way, is the National Archaeological Museum, where you'll see original mudéjar ceilings. So these are ceilings constructed by artisans of Muslim descent, really beautiful, like geometrical ceilings that were commissioned by Spain's kings because they really, really appreciated the artisanal skills of these people. And they are fantastic things to see. You'll get neck ache looking up at them, unfortunately. And Visigoth crowns. Speaking of neck ache, I want to give a quick shout out to the Church of San Francisco el Grande, which is in La Latina, going back to La Latina, and they have the second largest cupola in Europe. They've also got a fresco by Goya, and this one's really interesting because it contains a little Hitchcockian style self-portrait. He's put himself in amongst the crowds. And for more Goya, go down to the river, another quiet little area where you'll find the Ermita de San Antonio de la Florida, which is a small church that is just covered in frescoes by the great painter himself and contains his bones, but not his head, interestingly. And I'm not going to go into that because, wow, I'm running on quite a lot today. And in fact, I feel like my time is kind of up. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode today because I feel like it's something that I get asked about quite a lot. I see a lot of people asking about this. What are the underrated and overrated attractions in Madrid? And I hope I haven't done a disservice because although, I've said that Sol, Mercado San Miguel, the Reina Sofia and the Royal Palace are all overrated, they're still all worth taking a look at. I just feel that they have some negative elements that mean that they could be so much better. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I really enjoyed talking about it. If you'd like to put in your pennyworth and tell me what you think is underrated or overrated in Madrid, please do get in touch. I love to hear your feedback. And if you're a fan of the show in general, please like and subscribe. Please go to my website, sign up for my newsletter. I'm at themakingmadrid.com. And thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.